Okay, so now we're going to step through the Spectrum donor portal, and I've set up, this is my demo environment. I've set up some sample data that's going to showcase the functionality here in this donor portal. Not all of it is functional. There's a donation portal where donors can give online, and I don't have a PayPal account set up on this environment, so I won't be able to show that. But we will go ahead and step through all of these menu items that are available here for donors. Before we do, let's just talk about this landing page. When the donors log in, again, I've logged in with the user who has rights to all of the portals, and your donors won't see that. They'll only see donor or maybe another portal or two if you've given them access to that. But this donor landing page starts with customizable text at the top left. You can put anything you want in there, and you can update that as often as you like. If you've got news you want to give to your donors, you can put it there. On the top right, we have a very abbreviated fund summary, just a simple year-to-date fund summary. They can choose the funds to which they have access, or they can choose all funds to get a summary of all of the financial data for all of their funds to which they have access. But there's a much more detailed fund statement that is available we'll get to in a second. They can drill through on this year-to-date fund summary link and get to that page. But this is just a quick, at a glance, fund summary that they can see. Next over here, we've got grant history. We have a chart that shows their giving amounts by year. You can tell I'm working with very old data that says they gave $20,000 in 2009, and I haven't updated this database with much more grant history since then. But this has a chart of their grant history over the years. They also have a chart of gift history available, and it looks like I'm not connected to a Financial Edge database, so I'm not getting gift history for this particular donor. But gift history you can drill down into, grant history you can drill down into, and those are lists of grant data and gift data, respectively. They're also available through this screen here as well. You got grant history and gift history on the menu. And then on the bottom right here, we have giving opportunities. Not sure if you're familiar with these giving opportunities, but it's essentially crowdfunding. If you have a proposal in GE that you don't necessarily want to fund yourself as a foundation with your own discretionary funds, if you'd like to open it up for other donors to fund, you can set up a giving opportunity online and allow them to essentially do some crowdfunding within your donor base. And we'll get to that whenever we get into giving opportunities. But this is just a quick abbreviated list of the giving opportunities. If you have lots of these, it's only going to show the first 4 or 5 giving opportunities that are available, and they can drill in and see everything that's published by using this link, or again by using the donor menu. So this is the home page. It gives them just a quick overview of what's going on with their fund and with the foundation. The fund summary gives them essentially a fund statement. This is a configurable fund statement. If Fusion Labs does your fund statement, if we've built a fund statement for you, then the same tables that we have used to configure your fund statement with all the custom account ranges and those sorts of things, that same configuration is used to display the data on the web. And so for this particular fund, we can see just real quickly a balance and an available balance. This is a total net assets, and this is a cash available balance for this particular fund. For the year, we've got a breakdown of all the contributions, income, and loss. And again, these are all configurable based on how your foundation breaks down those individual components. These are drill throughs, so I can click on one of these and go in and see either this year or last year the transactions. When I go in and take a look, it lists, this would be a list. There are no transactions to display here in my sample data set, but there would be a list of all the transactions for the fund, and these are essentially gifts that are coming in. I chose this particular fund when I came in, so it's got this fund. This is the income and loss breakdown on the investment. I can modify some of these. I can do a date range, a start date. I've got an end date here from the end date of my date range. I can search for a particular transaction description, etc. So, and then of course, once I get a list of transactions, once I've done my search, I can print that list in the printer-friendly version that pops up in a separate browser window. this is printable as well. So this has a printer-friendly version too on this fund summary. And I'm looking at just this one fund. I can take a look at this other fund and see what its numbers look like. This is also looks like it's zeros, and then I can take a look at all of my funds together, and it would give me a composite view of all the data, an aggregate view of both funds put together. So this is the fund summary. Again, completely configurable to how your foundation does their finances. Grant history is a list of the grants that have been given by this donor and by this donor's funds. So it's not necessarily gifts that have been given by the donor, but by the donor funds. So if my wife and I are both advisors on a fund, for example, and she gave a gift from one of the funds that we're both advisors on, I would see it here. So this is grant history. I can choose the fund that I'm going to see data for, and it sets the list appropriately. If I want to see more than 10 per page, I can change that. I can search by year. I can search by recipient. I can click on a recipient name, and it'll take me to a recipient info page, and it will show me the information about this recipient. It'll give me essentially just details about the organization that received the gift. Anytime I'm looking at one of these organizations, I can create another grant for them. So I could make a grant recommendation to the South Carolina Blood Bank. This was a $25,000 grant. I could make a new grant recommendation to the South Carolina Blood Bank by clicking here, and it would take me directly to the donor advised grant recommendation screen, where I could make a grant recommendation. So that's grant history. Grant recommendations. This is a list of the grant recommendations that I have made online. It's not all of my grant recommendations. I may have phoned some in or faxed some in, et cetera, but these are the ones that I've made online in Spectrum. Or if your foundation is converting from Proffer, this would also list the donor advised grant recommendations that have come in from Proffer. But for my saved recommendations, it looks like I don't have any saved recommendations. We'll go ahead and do one in just a second so that we can see the grant recommendation. But these are filters. I can filter just the recommendations by a given fund. Oh, looks like we've got some for the Hugo Endowment Fund. So these are grant recommendations that I've made in the past. I can filter them by status. I just want to look at the ones that have been submitted. Search by creator. I could show all of the grant recommendations that have been made online, or I can show just the ones that I have made. And then I can also search by type. It looks like we've got grants, fund transfers, and grant transfers. So online we can make grant recommendations for standard grants. We can make recommendations for inter-fund transfers from one of my funds to another of my funds. And then we can also flag a transfer as a grant, make it charitable so that the IRS knows. So this is how I access my saved recommendations. Again, print will give me a pop-up printer-friendly version that I can print out, and it's just the ones that I've filtered. So this is where I can see my saved recommendations. Here's where I would create a brand new recommendation, and let's go ahead and step through this. I'm going to choose this fund, the Johnson Fund. When I'm going to give a grant, I can choose, and these are all optional. You can turn these on or turn these off at your discretion as a foundation. But I can look at my grant history and see who I've given to make another request to an organization that I've already given to. I can search from a recipient list, and essentially what that would do is it would look through your constituent database, and your constituent table in your grants database for all the recipients that are valid 501c3s that have been flagged as grant recipients. And if you don't want your donors to have access to that full list, you can turn this feature off where they can't type it in from a list. And then they can also type in a brand new recipient. If I want to give to the Jeff Foundation, I could type in a new recipient name and it would let me do that. Again, that's optional. If you don't want your donors typing in the names of these recipient organizations, you can turn that off. But let's go to grant history and see who I've given to before. And these are a bunch of my grants. Let's give one here to the Catholic Church. And I'm going to add this selected recipient to my grant recommendation. And you can see here the name of the organization was selected as St. Joseph's Catholic Church. I've got the address. I can add additional contact information here. And that's optional. The little red asterisk indicates a required field, and so these are not required. This is very similar to functionality to what you see on the proffer web parts in BB&C. I can configure a minimum amount, and I've configured this demo system, to have a minimum grant amount of $500. You can set that to whatever you like. Let's just do $1,500. Let's do one payment, and we'll just call it a single payment. We can do multiple payments and give, you can set a frequency. You can do weekly payments. You can do monthly payments, 4 quarterly payments, etc. There is a feature I don't have turned on here in this environment, but there is a feature where, if you like, your donors can set up what we consider recurring grants. We did this for religious organizations that want their donors to be able to log in and give monthly, like a tithe, that sort of thing. So they want to give weekly or they want to give monthly, the same amount every month. And when that comes into GE, instead of processing it to a grant, we can process it to a designated grant now instead. I'll show you that in a minute. Let's just say this one's a single payment of $1,500. Designation is a required field. Special request is not required. And then you can choose to have the fund be anonymous or the donor be anonymous, or both, and that gets transferred to the grant record as well. The acknowledgement is the donor's name and address, essentially. Who do you want to get acknowledged for this grant? So I'll just put in, I've logged in as Mark Groseth, so I'll just put in his name. I'll leave his address out, but this is typically information you guys already have on file on the fund record. There is legal terminology here that satisfies the IRS. If we're giving from a 501c3 to a 501c3, or from a tax-exempt org to another tax-exempt org, we've essentially got to make sure that the donor agrees that this is a free and clear grant. And at this point, I can save it, or I can submit it, or I can print it. Again, print pops up a printer-friendly version. Save lets me come back later and not submit it yet to the foundation, but I can save it and let my business partner review it later if he wants to. You can leave it in the save list, just like you can a web application in the Spectrum Web application portal. And then the submit option just saves it and submits it all in one fell swoop here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to submit this grant recommendation, and it says that my grant recommendation has been submitted. I'm going to get an email. I've turned off Outlook here, but I'm going to get an email that says, thank you for submitting your grant recommendation. I'll have a brief summary of that grant data. But now I'm going to come back into GE. I'll close this docket record. And I'm going to go to Manage Online Grant Recommendations. And this $1,500 grant that just came in is the one that was just created. I'm going to double click and pull it up. This was to St. Joseph's Catholic Church, $1,500 from the Johnson Fund. I'll go ahead and set the supervisor as the manager on this record. I can override some of this data here if I like before I process it. I'll go ahead and save it. The Process Info tab gives us information about the lifespan of this record, when it was created, when it was submitted. Because I didn't save it and then come submit it later, it got created and submitted at the same time. Once it gets reviewed or processed or declined, these will get populated appropriately. This grant number label, once this gets processed to a grant, this will be a link for the grant number. So then at this point, I can process it just like I would have done in the proffer portal. I can create the grant, give it a grant request type, and give it a date, and go ahead and create that grant record. Here it is with a parent grant request of $1,500 to the Catholic Church. And you'll notice that the date processed was just updated with today's date. It was processed by me. Now I've got a grant number that I can go and link to. As I mentioned before, one of the options in a newer version that I don't have configured on this development environment, on this demo environment, is the option to say that you want recurring payments. If the donor had said they wanted recurring payments, then this option to create grant would have actually said create designated grant instead. And at that point, I could have created a designated grant that would have set the frequency that the donor selected on the designated grant to that designated recipient in the amount that they had specified, rather than creating a grant. And then at that point, this link wouldn't be a grant number, it would be a designated grant number. So that is how the grant request works. Sorry about the delay there. My machine had locked up for a second. The grant recommendation has been submitted. I'm going to go back to my list of grant recommendations. And now we see here this grant recommendation has been submitted. It's got a status here of processed, and I can drill through and take a look at it. It's no longer editable. It's read-only here, but I can still see all the details that I submitted. There's a duplicate button now that essentially lets me re-grant, if you will. I can re-request the same grant recommendation again to the same donor for the same amount. It pulls up a brand new grant recommendation screen that's pre-populated that lets me make changes before I submit at that point. So that's grant recommendations. You can also recommend a transfer. It's very similar, but instead of choosing a recipient, you choose both a funding source and a target fund. So where am I giving money from? Where am I giving money to? Both of these drop downs are lists of my available funds. So I can only give to funds that are configured to me for me to have access. Same concepts here: minimum amount, acknowledgement, special request, etc. The legal statement. And this all works the same way. When you come back into GE to take a look at that transfer request, instead of letting you create a grant, it actually lets you create an interfund transfer grant. So that's recommending a transfer. Grant opportunities. So this is the crowdfunding concept I talked about before. Before we go in and take a look at that, I want to show you what I've done in GE. I have set up a proposal to be funded online. So there's a tab here called Web Funding on our proposal screen. By default, this is turned off, but for this one, I've gone ahead and enabled it. So online funding is enabled. I can set a start and an end date if I like. I can leave these blank for default amounts. I'm sorry, for default dates. Publish it immediately or leave it open until you uncheck it. The goal amount, I'm trying to raise $80,000. Donors have to give a minimum of $10,000, and the contribution. So far, what I'm saying here with this last line contribution is that the foundation has chosen to give $20,000 from its discretionary funding from this fund to the cause. So $20,000 of the $80,000 is being paid by the foundation, and the remaining $60,000 is what we're trying to raise from the donors. This is a short name that goes online. It's different than the proposal short name. So this is your internal name for what you want to call it, but this is what you want to call it online. And then a brief description of what you want this, what you want this web proposal funding mechanism online, what you want it to be, how you want it to be described. And that's going to go online. You could put HTML in here if you like. But this is where I've enabled it. And so I'm going to go back now and show you this. This is a list of all the available giving opportunities. Again, they can print this if they want to do so. They can sort by column headers. But when they click on the grant, they see this crowdfunding screen where they've got, you can see that we're trying to raise $80,000. We've only raised $20,000 so far, and that's by the funds from the foundation. And any grants that have been given by other donors would be here. Community Foundation portal, total raised from donors would be here. So you'd be able to see that we've got other money coming in from other donors. The description that we typed in before shows up here. And then they can contribute right here. And when they contribute, this gives them the opportunity to make a donor advised grant recommendation. So it takes them back to that donor grant recommendation screen. But instead of the standard donor grant recommendation screen that we just saw, it's going to ask them to make an interfund transfer, to transfer money from one of their funds to the fund that you pre-designate for this giving opportunity. When they do make recommendations, those recommendations are going to come back in to GE whenever you go over to the incoming donor advised grant recommendations. It'll all look the same, but behind the scenes, the grant recommendation will be tied to this proposal ID. And you'll see a list of all of the proposals, a list of all the grant recommendations that have come in. Yes, all the grant recommendations that have come in from the donors to fund this proposal online. You can tell we've got a total right here that says current funding total is $20,000. That includes the foundation's contribution, but that would go up as you get more records coming in here from your donors that are giving. So this is grant opportunities. Let's keep going here. Gift history, we talked about grant history before. Gift history, again, I'm not connected to a Financial Edge database in this environment, so we don't have any gift data to show. If we did, all those Financial Edge transaction records would be listed here. I can filter them here, etc. So this is where gift history would show up. And then donate, again, I don't have PayPal configured, but I will show you what the first part of this looks like anyway. I can make a donation. I can choose the fund from which I want to give. Make a donation amount. I can choose an amount. I can make a comment. This is my billing information for the credit card processing. And this payment section is where we would insert a section here for your payment processor. So today we support PayPal. PayPal has 3 different account types, and we support all 3. We also support CyberSource as a merchant, and we've got the ability to build out merchant the functionality to support any merchant account. So we can add that. We can add all those, but essentially you would do your credit card information below for your donation, and it would submit, it would process the transaction. If the transaction was successful, then this designation essentially creates a gift in the Raiser's Edge. So this does an RE gift, pardon me, to record the donation in Raiser's Edge. We also do online donations anonymously. So this page is only available for donors, but we have another donation page that is available for site visitors. So if you ever wanted to do a fundraising campaign and you didn't want people to log in and create gift records in a fund that doesn't exist, etc., you can do donations on the main page without requiring your users to log in. We can support that as well. So that's an overview of the donor portal in the Spectrum web portal. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now, and we'll open up for questions.